कभी एक पल भी कहीं ये उदासी दिल मेरा भूले. That melancholic masterpiece from the 1975 film Millie, written by Yogesh and sung by Kishore Kumar, was the composer Sachin Dev Burman's last song before he died on October 31st, 1975. His death brought to an end arguably one of Hindi cinema's greatest music careers, stretching some 38 years from 1937, producing hundreds of minimalist melodies that endure several decades hence. However, before he became a composer, Burman, born on October 1st, 1906, was, as his biographer, the well known journalist and writer Sathya Saran says, a prince without a throne. He was born in a princely family in Tripura and grew up in the lush green hamlet of Comilla in what is now Bangladesh. He spent his early life surrounded by music both at home, where his father, Nabadwipchandra, was an accomplished singer, and outside, where the lilt of the folksy songs stirred the air. To get a flavor of Burman's life, Mayank Chhaya report spoke to Sathya Saran, who has just released the paperback version of her biography, The Musical World of S.D. Burman, Suno Mere Bandhu Re, Sathya Saran. Interestingly, we are meeting on the 11th death anniversary of Devanand, and today.
Yes.
And as you know, that arguably theirs, that is Devanand's and S.D. Burman's, was the greatest creative collaboration of Hindi cinema in my book.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What do you think worked for them and between them?
I think what worked for them was that Devanand liked the fact that S.D. Burman took great interest in what was being shot, who was shooting, who were the actors, what was the scene before and after, and the scene that was being shot for the song. So I think he liked that. Both Vijayanand and Devanand liked the fact that that much attention was being paid by a music director whose job actually is to do one song and push off,
Right.
But he wanted to make it work, he wanted to make it fit. And I think some kind of chemistry worked, and at an intellectual and emotional level.
Right. It's almost like father-son, right?
Yes. And if you remember, he was the only director who said, I will wait for you, when S.D. Sahab had his cataract operation.
Right.
And he said, it may take forever, so I don't want to hold you up. And Gurudev didn't wait, but Devanand said, guide won't happen without you.
Interesting, you should mention the fact that S.D. Burman was so interested in the movie as a whole, the shots and the framing and the story arc, etc. R.D. Burman inherited that.
Yes.
Maybe he learned from his father for sure, but he had exactly the same focus, I'm told.
Right, because he used to assist his father. He spent a lot of time learning from him. So the least thing he can do is to get the right things.
Another point, which is somewhat of a digression, I'm sure you knew him too. I knew Devanand very well for over 35 years, rather closely. In fact, I almost published his autobiography, Romancing with Life. I used to talk to him about a lot of things, and one of the things that I talked to him about was S.D. Burman, obviously. And his observation, apart from everything else, that he was obviously a genius composer. One observation that has stayed with me from Mr. Anand is that he was such a modern composer. S.D. Burman, if you see songs, they always had a remarkably modern touch, even when they were minimalist.
Yes. A lot of repartee, a lot of instruments that we think are modern, along with the old flute and the, sitar. He used a lot of modern instruments. And there were times when he would call for an instrument. Like in the Jewel Thief song, he waited for that drum to come because he wanted that particular percussion. And I think, yes, he was in his own way young, in spite of being much older than the people he was composing for.
Right. You write in your book that he could play a lot of instruments. He made it a point to learn quite a few.
Yes.
Talk to me a bit about that.
I think he was fascinated by music right from the beginning, and of course the flute was his favorite. And there is the story that one of his companion servants taught him how to even fashion a flute out of the reeds that grow in that water, because they are perfect. Those bamboo reeds are perfect for the flute. But I think he did. I think RD also inherited that, and RD played many more instruments than his father. But his father did have a penchant for a lot of instruments, and percussion was one of them. I don't know whether he played any other string instrument. I don't think
I
so.
see. I see. Since you never met, you write early on in your introduction, since you never met S.D. Burman, you mentioned that initially you had to build upon from second-hand sources. What were your immediate challenges as you embarked on the book?
I think the fact that there was no one from his family whom I could speak to. His wife was in hospital, and I think she died soon after. RD had already gone, SD had gone, Ashaji was not willing to talk, I couldn't reach her, though she does know me, but I couldn't reach her.
I
And
see.
that was it. So I did get a lot of help from a gentleman called Moti Lalwani, who offered me
Right.
all the research he had been doing as paper cuttings, newspaper cuttings, magazine articles, and interviews that he had recorded or collected. So I got a lot of help from there. But the
Right.
real challenge was to shape the book, to give the structure to the book, because there were already two books on him. One was on the
Exactly.
way. Penguin told me, we don't want your book now because we already have a book coming out on S.D. Burman. And Mr. H.Q. Chowdhury had written a fantastic book, which I have, of course, referred to in mine and quoted from with his permission. In Bangladesh, he had written a wonderful book. So, what do you write new about a man who's no longer there and whose life has been lived and is done?
Right.
So, the challenge was the structure.
Yeah. Interesting. There was also a mention of the writer Abrar Alvi, whom you knew, and from him you picked up the fact three things, like you mentioned that Burman was a gentle soul, he was possessive about his palm, and he was very careful with his money. That could be
Yes,
said of thousands of people. Where did you choose to begin
true.
to unravel the man's essence? At what point, once you got Mr. Lalwani's material, how did you zero in on what you wanted to build the book
I
as?
think I think there was a hell of a lot of material. Some of it was not true. It was wrongly reported, and I had to set those right, for which I had to go into other interviews of his accompanists to see what the truth was. Then there was also the fact that, uh, sorry, what was your question?
No, I was. No, I'm saying the fact that Abrar Alvi told
Abrar
you
Ali.
three things. Yeah, yeah. Uh,
Yes, and
Not
Abrar Sahab
something that you can build a book on. So,
No, not enough to build a book on, but definitely, I'll tell you what really worked for me was finding S.D. Burman Sahab's autobiography,
right,
which he had written. It's a small book written in Bangla, translated beautifully. And that gave me a feel of the man, because there is in those lines, those very simple lines that he's written, you see his humility, you see his passion for music, his work, his absolute desire to be superlative in whatever he does, to excel in it. And you see the fact that there is this slight angst about where the world is going.
right.
You see that as a kind of subtext. So I
I
think
see.
all that worked, and I think that made me realize why he was so choosy about how much work he did, why he didn't run after fame, that even when he didn't get the awards that we thought he should get, he brushed it away.
Right. One of the most remarkable features for me of S.D. Burman's career as a composer is how predominantly minimalist he was in his melody, his instrumentation, his arrangement. And yet he produced something so splendid repeatedly. And the way you're describing his autobiography, even there he sounds minimalist. That's an
Yes.
interesting quality to have.
Right. And he doesn't, I mean, he used to not take more than 7 or 8 instruments. And again,
Right.
there is the story where he sends back one instrumentalist saying, I'd only asked for 7, why are there 8? Or may I
Right.
asked for 8, why are there 9? I'll pay you, but I don't want you to play, you know, because RD had got that extra guy there. So I
Yeah.
think he kept himself as close to pure melody as he could. And it
Right.
came from his folk training, the fact that he loved ball music and he liked Baitali, and all this added to that the weight of his pure melody.
Right. Uh, I'm interested in your first encounter with the material that Mr. Lalwani provided you. It was a lot of material, as you point out. And
Yeah,
apparently, you sat on it for 4 months before you got to
I
reading
didn't
it.
dare look at it
Yeah,
because
it was
I
a
was
cacophony
working
of voices, right?
I was working on a project at that time, and Mr. Lalwani started bombarding me with one thing after another and another, and I would like duck literally when I'd open my email box and see all Mr. Lalwani, 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 Lalwani 5, Lalwani 6, Lalwani 7, and I'd say,
Right.
what am I going to do with all this material? How am I going to collate it? Because it came from every possible source. There was Hindustan Times, there was Hindu, there was Statesman. So for a long time, I just sat on it.
Hmm.
And then when I started working, I kind of put them together, and then I kind of classified them, put them in a box, into a folder. I learned a lot of computer use in the
Right.
process, how to make folders.
Yeah.
And I think from there, then the interviews were put in separately. The book that I was reading, I had to keep that separately, and then I started working in the
Right.
space that they created.
You know, I mean, this is my sense. I could be wrong, but it seems through the notes that you had, you began to hear the voices and sounds that S.D. Burman might have heard in Comilla, right?
Right.
When he was growing up. It's now in Bangladesh, but it was not so when he was growing up there.
Mhm.
How did that part, in terms of perceiving a book through sight, I mean, sounds and voices, how did that come about?
See, I grew up in the Northeast.
Oh, I
I spent
see.
the first few years of my life in Calcutta.
Right.
I can understand Bangla still, and I had learnt very basically to read and write. And then we went to Assam. I did all my schooling there, and there you hear Assamese and Bengali. So I think, and the region is very similar.
Right.
Recently, when we're coming back from Bhutan, recently meaning maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we were coming back from Bhutan, we were diverted to Agartala.
Hmm.
And when the plane landed, I said, my God, this is like back home in Guwahati. Nothing has changed. The same little grassy roads and ponds you could see and flowers growing wild. So
Right.
it was very easy to get into under his skin for me.
Sometimes people do not give enough credence to the geographical surroundings of a creative person. That
Yeah.
has a profound effect on the way a creative mind evolves. Uh, S.D. Burman's absolute passion for folk traditions, be it instrumentation or songs or even sometimes lyrics, had something to do with the fact where he grew up, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. See, he also had classical training because his father was a Rupert singer. He
Right.
also then learned classical music later from Amanali's uncle and other teachers. So he
Right.
had this balance between the two, and which is why he can do Tere Naina Talash Karte
Right.
as easily as Aega Pardesi in the same movie. Huh?
True, true. There is
So
something.
he could switch.
So now go ahead. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, no, no. That's all. That's all I was going to
No,
say.
I was saying there is something to change gears a bit. There is something strikingly cinematic about a prince that Burman was, pursuing music in the early 20th century in India, still very much under the British rule. Now,
Hmm.
these three, if you look at it, a prince, music, early 20th century in British India. What did you learn about that milieu while you were researching of the book?
I learned something about the prince,
I
that
see.
he was a prince in the way he carried himself. I mean, people looked at him as if he was a saint because he had these saintly airs, and people thought he was some kind of a monk.
Right.
But I think what he did was, if you look at the way he carried himself, the way he conducted himself in the industry, never begging, never asking for work, never compromising on his talent, never bending, you know, to malice or to
Right.
anything. I think that was very princely of him. Though he gave away his kingdom, he said, I will never go back to Comilla because of the way they treated his wife Mira. The fact remained that he took the royal upbringing with him wherever he went and applied it to his art.
Right. I'm a bit ignorant about the reference that you made, the way they treated his wife Mira. Would you care to elaborate a bit? Because I'm sorry, I'm not particularly aware of that aspect.
No, obviously, what happened was that when he married Mira, who was a student, and they sang very well together, and he did realize that he was falling in love, and he approached her, and she agreed. She was a bit in awe of him too. Uh, they were very upset when he took her home because she was a commoner.
I see.
And there was not the usual respect one gives a new Bahurani in a Bangla household, especially in royal Bangla household. So he decided that he didn't want any of that. He didn't want her to be insulted again and again, and he didn't want any of that
I see. You,
old-fashioned way of
right.
looking at things.
Right. Right. You have some early description about Burman's hometown, surrounded by lush green vistas and lilt of folk music in the air.
Mm.
Uh, Tell me a bit about that, how you were imagining it, because my sense is that a lot of it is something that you conjured up as in a writerly fashion on the basis of raw material that you had.
Yes, I looked at a lot of pictures. I looked at some videos of Comilla today, and I still saw people lining the streets fishing.
I
I
see.
still saw, I saw all that. I had pictures of the house, of the palace, and how it had turned into a poultry farm. I had seen all that. And
Okay.
poultry farm, not even an official one. It was just somebody, letting chickens grow there and using them for whatever purpose he wanted
Right.
to sell eggs or eat or whatever. Anyway, so I saw all that, and then of course, as I said, my own northeast things kicked in. All my
Right.
own wanderings in the hills and wanderings along the kacha roads kicked in, and I think that came together.
Right. In that milieu, you have Burman's father,
Mm.
Nabadwipchandra, singing bhajans, and as you said, he was an accomplished singer himself.
Yeah.
How might that have affected or impacted or influenced in priming and prepping him up as a young man? What's your take on that?
I think it did a lot. It did a lot because he would every afternoon, every early evening, all the children would sit down and sing. And he would hold classes. I mean, he would sing and they would sing, and he was leading them along into classical music. So he was one of SD's first teachers.
Right. You write about two folk artists in particular who left a lasting impact on S.D. Burman. Anwar, the Bhatyali singer, and Madhav, who told stories from the Ramayana.
Yeah.
Both were his first gurus, like he himself said.
Right. They were his
Tell me
servants.
about
Nothing
that.
he did.
Yeah.
They were his servants, and the Batiali singer would just go, he would just break into song when they went by the riverside, and he would probably explain to him what the songs meant. And then they would sit with their feet in the water, fashioning flutes or just trying to fish. Don't know what they did, but that's what they did. And then boats would go past, which is why we have so many boat songs created by this man.
Right.
It's something that is in his psyche. The river means a boat, the boat means a boatman, and the boatman means a song. And then, of course, because this guy was a Batiali singer, the songs are philosophical. So that enters into the lyrics. Maybe he had it, I don't know, but maybe he had something to say about the lyrics.
Right. It's almost as if becoming a composer, a musician was a fait accompli for him early on.
Yeah.
It was just handed. I mean, there was no other option, it seems,
No.
the way you're describing him.
Yeah, I think so, because he started composing when he was still in Calcutta, and he became very popular. But then there was this thirst to be a national name, have national exposure.
Right.
Which is why he came to Bombay. So I think the fact that if you have all these influences, I mean, classical singers themselves are composers. Every time they sing a song or sing a raga,
Right.
you're composing, and you're composing differently every single time. So there was the composer in him because of the classical, and then there was the composer in him because he had all these different, what is it called, flavors in his thali, which he could mix and create a new flavor out of.
Yeah. After his move to Calcutta, you write about how the famous singer Casey Day, who happened to be blind and who happened to be the uncle of Manna Day, in a sense unleashed Burman's musical impulses. I'm interested to know a little bit more about how that experience would have shaped his career all the way until his death.
Actually, I think there is one line in his autobiography where he says that I strive to get the same level as my teacher. And I imagine that whole section where he tries to get the same passion, the same gravitas, the same emotion in his voice as his teacher gets. And then he realizes that maybe he needs to concentrate. So he blinds himself with a dark piece of cloth.
Right.
And he realizes that something else emerges then than just words and tunes. So that was imaginary, but I think it kind of puts forward to the reader what he must have gone through, to how much he must have striven to get that emotion that everybody talks of. Amitabh Bachchan in the foreword says that no other singer has really got to where S.D. Burman could sing when he sang his song.
Exactly. Yeah, that's true. That's true. To again shift a bit, in a letter you quote from his father, there is a reference to Burman's passion for tennis. In fact, he was a very competent tennis player. I'm trying to imagine Sachin Dev Burman playing tennis. It doesn't. I mean, visually it doesn't gel, right? For whatever reason, but apparently he was a pretty accomplished tennis player. Tell me a bit about that.
Princes do everything. They ride, they play tennis, they play golf nowadays.
Right.
And he must have played football.
Yeah.
That letter, incidentally, was not written by his father. It was written by me.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I see. It's an imagined thing.
I had to weave in the fact that he played tennis. I had to weave in so much without saying it all in a bold manner. So all the letters, but the cadences of a father writing to his son, I think I managed to get that.
Right. What do you make of this view that he stifled his wife Meera's impressive talents, both as a singer and composer of some merit? In fact, it's been suggested frequently that many of his songs
were greatly helped by not just Mira. Of course, R.D. Burman's contribution is very well documented, but Mira played a considerable role in many of his songs. What do you make of that?
See, it's something I've brought out in the book, which nobody else has talked about,
Right.
that when you have a talent at home, why is that talent not given full reign? I mean, she sang with you in the early days. Why has she not got a single song from your entire repertoire?
Exactly.
I have brought that out. But then there is the answer that every music director gives. That if you can get a Lata Mangeshkar or an Asha Bhosle with one one short recording,
Yeah.
and they're superlative, why would we look elsewhere? And then he was a Lata fan, that. I mean, he
Yeah,
said,
yeah.
"You give me Lata and I don't want anything else."
Right.
You know.
And yet they
But
had.
then she did help him a lot. He did use her lyrics and create music around it, especially for the Durga Puja events in Calcutta, because she wrote in Bangla. And she then, after R.D. Burman left, became his arranger. I mean,
I
she
see.
became his manager. She looked after the studio.
Right, right.
So
So
he did
it was
use her
a
skills.
substantive collaboration between the two.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. You
There are
were
some
obvious.
unsaid stories, but we won't talk about them.
Why don't we?
No,
Uh,
because what's the point?
I know, true. You were obviously very familiar with, like all of us, with Burman's music before you started writing the book. Once having written the book, did you begin to look at his career as a genius composer differently, or these were two different tracks in your mind?
No, I've always loved his songs, but then I understood him not as a genius composer, but as someone who was quite versatile, who was young at heart, and could do a Raat Akeli Hai, which I don't know any other music director who has done a song quite like that.
Absolutely.
O.P. Nayyar in his early days did a lot of those happy, racy tunes where there is seduction as well as, but this is different. This is the mood of Raat Akeli Hai is completely different.
Absolutely.
So I think
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, I think that's what I thought about him.
I see.
did not think about, oh, was he a genius? Of course, they were all geniuses, the whole bang lot of them.
True. That is true. I often say, very partly in jest, but mostly seriously, that for me, if I were to list five greatest composers of Hindi cinema, I would say S.D. Burman, R.D. Burman, S.D. Burman, R.D. Burman, and the fifth will keep changing. I somehow think these two have no peers. It's amazing that you have S.D. Burman, then you have a son who equals
Yeah,
in
and is
fact,
yet
even surpasses in some ways.
yeah, it's different.
Yeah,
That's where he shone, because he managed to take it one step ahead and keep completely contemporary.
absolutely. Yeah.
Everything's in milieu. No, but I don't think I quite agree with you there. I think if you look at Naushad Saab and if you look at Shankar,
No, sure. I agree. They were all masters of their
they
domain.
were
There's
all
no question.
amazing. I mean, that was a beautiful time for music. I'm so
Right.
glad I grew up then with all of it surrounding me.
Right. How do you view some of Burman's conflicts, such as with Lata Mangeshkar or Sahil Ludhianvi, or to some extent even Rahul Dev Burman? I think Majroor Sultanpuri once pointed out that his father used to be somewhat upset at the new trend that he started in music, and R.D. Burman was determined not to follow that path.
He just got stuck. Yeah, he used to get upset, but he realized it's necessary, because when he was asked to do the music for Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, he handed it over to his son. He told them, use him because he's young, he understands the new rhythm. He will, and I don't want to do a movie about drugs anyway.
Right.
So he knew what he was doing. I think he was more upset about the fact that R.D. was not disciplined.
I see.
And he tended to, you see, he went through a bad patch. We all know that, where he was lifting and shifting,
Yeah,
and I think all that upset the father a lot.
I see. What are your memories? I don't know if it's part of the book, but what are your memories of his last film, Millie, and
Mm.
especially the great song "Badi Suni Suniye." That was his sort of the final song, which I think R.D. Burman recorded uh,
Yes.
because he was in hospital.
I have a very poignant chapter
Oh,
Nathan,
I
which
see.
is
I
very
because I began reading it only after I reached out to you, so I haven't reached yet. So
it's the
go
last.
ahead.
What a
Yeah.
poem Yogesh composed. He was more than moved by the note of sadness in it, the searing quality of loneliness the words expressed. Badi Suni Suni hai. The tune was heart-wrenching enough, but the words truly imbued it with a soul. Bah, Yogesh, he said, you have excelled yourself. I tell you, this song will be an eternal plaint for the lonely soul. Sometimes he felt the same loneliness. He wondered why, but he knew the answer. He would never let it come to his mind and present itself. Enough then to let it spin itself out in a tune. Kishore will sing this song, he told himself, coming to a sudden decision. It was good also for Bukesh's voice with its border of sadness. But Kishore, he would be the right voice for it. He would sing it to him and see the reaction. It was his favorite ploy to watch the reaction of the singer that he had chosen as he put the song out for the first time, words and music, and let it play to the very voice that would record it. It helped them catch the nuances he wanted, and secretly, impishly, he knew he could bring to his tune much more than most of them could, though their voices were clearer, sharper, and more acceptable to the listener when on screen. As expected, Kishore listened attentively. He was pleased. He was old now and got tired easily, and happy that the boy did not bounce about and play his pranks as he used to do earlier. He sat sedate and listened. A bit too quiet, he thought. Does he not like the tune? He sang, he finished singing, and he waited. The boy would not look up. He sat with his head bent over his knees. Kishore, he asked, what happened? When Kishore looked up, he was surprised to see his eyes full of tears. He had made him cry. This laughing, joking child was crying to this tune of loneliness. What chord in his heart had the song touched? Kishore got up suddenly. I am going, he said, and before he could remonstrate, I am going and I will come back. When the song is ready, I will come back. जब तक मैं ready नहीं होऊंगा, ये गाना record नहीं होगा. He could only stare in silence at the space Kishore had occupied. He had left as if in a hurry. He knew the singer would work on his song, as was his habit. He would send a recording with Yogesh for him to work on.
That's wonderful. That's really touching. And what a song that was.
I know.
I mean, to
Almost
think
its swan
that
song.
after 38 years of having produced absolute masterclass music, the man, just a few days away from his death, produces this number. It is
Yeah.
astonishing.
And the same film has Maine Kaha Phoolon Se. Happy
Exactly.
childish number.
On a separate note, Satya, I've long believed that Hindi cinema music should be declared national treasure. Uh,
Absolutely.
the world has not, there's no peer, there's no rival to this. There is not a single human experience that they have not captured. It's to me, it's India's national therapy.
Yes. There used to be a program earlier, Mayank,
Yeah.
called Jab Ab Ka Uthe on All India
Oh,
Radio.
I see.
And it used to have people writing letters saying, I was in this mood and this song presented itself.
Oh,
So what you're
fascinating.
saying is right, that the entire gamut of emotions from loneliness to
Ab-
joy celebration is there.
I sincerely believe that a part of the reason why India has stayed anchored despite its many fractious problems, you have to attribute it to Hindi cinema music because people use that as therapy by singing or thinking about it.
Right, and it hasn't gone. You take old taxis long distance, and they're all playing Vivid Bharati with old songs.
Absolutely.
न कर मुझसे गम मेरे दिल की